The Rambam, in the very beginning of Hilchos Trumas, declares that Midaraisa, Truma and Meiser only obtain in Eretz Yisroel. What is referred to by Eretz Yisroel only applies to those lands conquered by a king of Klal Yisroel, or a Shofet, or a Novi, who acts by the consent of all of Klal Yisroel. In other words, only if the conqueror represents the will of the majority of Klal Yisroel can a leader's annexations be Kibush rabim and become Eretz Yisroel. But if an individual or a clan or a shevet were to go forth on their own and capture land, it is deemed to be Kibush Yachid. And even if it is within the borders of the homeland promised to Avram Avinu, it will not gain the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael in regards to the application of the mitzvah Satluyas Ba'aretz. The Karen Ara finds difficulty with this Rambam. The Karen Ara is in Yevamis Daf Pei Beis Amud Beit Divrei HaMaskil V'Chasav Oid HaRambam. If annexations only become Eretz Yisrael when done by a leader who represents the will of the majority of Klal Yisrael, then presently there should not be any Kedushas Haaretz Midaraisa, because the majority of Klal Yisrael did not come back after Golus Bavel. They stayed in Bavel. But the Rambam himself ruled that Kedusha Shnia, the Kedusha attained as a result of the Ayul of Bavel, applies for good. It means Midaraisa. This is the Rambam in Beis Bechir Perek Vav, Kedusha Shnia Kitchel Osid Lava. Return to explain things. First, we must turn to the Rambam Hilchos Beis Bechira. The Rambam Hilchos Beis Bechira, where he writes that the first Kedushas Haaretz came about as a result of conquest led by Yeshua. Once the land was taken from Klal Yisroel, the conquest expired and Kedushas Haaretz came undone. The produce of the land was no longer obligated in Truma or Meiser, and Shvius was bottled. In contrast to this, the second Kedusha, done by the Oil Bavel, was a result of return and settlement. And since then, Kedushas Haaretz derives from Chazaka, not from conquest. Wherever the immigration of the Oil Bavel by Ezra took hold, those areas gain Kedusha, and that Kedusha won't ever dissipate. Kedusha Shnia Kitchel Osid Lava, Kitchel Shaitel Osid Lava. The Kesef Mishnah asks, the Olam Mitzrayim settled the land, did they not? Then wasn't there Chazaka at the first Kedusha making also? In addition, the Kesef Mishnah confesses that he doesn't see the difference between Kibush and Chazaka. And why does the effect of Kibush lapse with Golus, but Chazaka not? Now, the Chaim and the Ksavim has a whole simon dedicated to this. It's Simon Kuf Nun Ches, it's Bedin Yesh Kinyan, La'akum Vedin Surya, and he goes off, and we are going to go off in a different direction. The Radvaz on the Rambam Hilchos Truma, Perek Aleph Halacha Gimel, he asked a shayla. New lands that Klal Yisroel were to gain control of in a manner consistent with Kibush Rabim after the initial conquest of Eretz Yisroel, does it assume the name of Eretz Yisroel for all matters, or is it just going to have Kedusha of Truma Meiser, which might be only Rabbanan, without getting the title of Eretz Yisroel outright? What is meant by the name of the Radva saying in Eretz Yisroel for all matters? We quote the Rambam. For this, we have to quote the Rambam in Sanhedrin, which is Hilchos Sanhedrin, Perek Daled Halacha Vav, where he writes that we don't perform smicha in Chutz La'aretz. In all places that the Oilei Mitzrayim settled warrants the title Eretz Yisroel. The Kafta Referach explains that the intention was to include those areas taken by the Oilei Mitzrayim, but not retaken by Oilei Bavel. hence are presently not chayiv in Truma Meiser, but are fit for smicha appointment. And let me point out, it's also those who live there and those shtachim that are not chayiv in Truma Meiser, but they have the Shem Eretz Yisrael from the time of Eilu Mitzrayim. You have the schus of living in Eretz Yisrael there, and you have a person has the schus if he's nikbar and he's buried there, of being buried in Eretz Yisrael, even though there is no Kedushas Truma Meiser. Now, this Radvaz's Shiloh is not a theoretical Shiloh. This Radvaz inquiry resolves to the case of Syria. Now, Syria, there was Kibush of David had done a conquest of pieces of Syria, and it was not considered Kibush rabim. So the Radvaz was saying, what if we have something like that, which is going to be Kibush rabim? Then not only would the dinim of Truma Meiser obtain, but in addition, his question is, would Syria also be good for performing smicha? At this point, we should ask, what is the difference between the requirements of Kedushas Aretz for Truma Meiser and the requirements necessary for the dinim which apply only in Eretz Yisrael, Smicha, and Hadar B'Eretz Yisrael? In an effort to achieve a correct understanding in these matters, we advance the analysis of the Rosh Hashiva, who says that there are two dimensions with regard to Eretz Yisrael. There is the actual entity of Eretz Yisrael. That's number one. And number two, there exists the dinim and kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, which compels the obligation regarding the produce of Eretz Yisrael. This kedusha can be a development of being the entity of Eretz Yisrael, but it is not necessarily so. The Radvaz's inquiry was, with regard to the entity of Eretz Yisrael, does acquisition of new lands after the initial conquest of Eretz Yisrael gain the status of the entity of the Chefetz of Eretz Yisrael, and is it good for smicha also? Would Syria become the entity of Eretz Yisrael if there was Kibush rabim, or is it just that some of the dinim found in the entity of Eretz Yisrael will apply there also as a result of the conquest, which in essence means Truma Meiser, even if it actually hasn't gained the status of being an entity of Eretz Yisrael? That was his Shiloh. So there are two dimensions in Eretz Yisrael. We turn to another difficulty. The Rambam states that since the first Kedusha came about by Kibush, once Kibush was neutralized, the Kedusha dissipated. So after the first Kibush, you wouldn't be chayiv in Truma Meiser. So why isn't that also true of the entity of Eretz Yisrael? Why don't you say that why does the Kaftar V'Ferach say that the land that the only Mitzrayim took are fit for the appointment of smicha, even if the Eilu Bavel did not resettle there, and hence there's no Kedusha Truma Meiser. If they no longer have Kedusha with respect to Truma Meiser, then neither should they have the dinim of Eretz Yisrael, which is to say you shouldn't be able to give smicha there. The Rosh Hashiva concludes that Kibush accomplishes two things. Number one, it creates the entity of Eretz Yisrael, the Chefetz Eretz Yisrael, and assigning the appellation of Eretz Yisrael to lands conquered by Kibush rabim. And this never dissipates, because it's a chalois ishtanas, an actual external event. Number two, a Kibush accomplished by virtue of conquest, the land acquires a quality of Kedusha with regard to Truma Meiser, and this is merely a chalois din. And if and when the Kibush is neutralized, all the dinim that arise out of Kibush collapse. Once a chalois ishtanas is generated, there's no longer a need for the cause of the chalois to endure. For once an external effect takes place, it continues to be extant, and it abides. Once a chalois ishtanas has come into existence, it contains sufficient reason for its continued existence. For example, chalois kedusha cannot lapse on its own. For example, you can't make a kedusha liyayim echad. You can't say hariyat mekdesh li hayayim lacher loy. And once it's chal, one day it's chal forever. In fact, the only way kedusha could ever being neutralized is if there's another chalais, which is mavatalit, then that's get, and misa. Don't think, if you learn the Gemara and Kedushin Yud Gimel on the base, you'll see that it doesn't come undone because the man dies. It's a matir, in a positive matir, the death of the husband. Because why? Because Kedushin is a chalais ishtanas, and without some kind of bittul, it's going to hang around. It's going to abide. Now, so too is the chalais shem Eretz Yisrael that was generated through Kibush. The fact that Kibush had been neutralized doesn't spell the end of the chalais shem Eretz Yisrael. And on the land. And that took place at the time of Yeshua. Hence it's called Eretz Yisrael with regard to Smicha, even though the early Bavel did not resettle there. Not so with the Kedushas Eretz that was produced by Kibush. The Kedusha and the dinim of Truma Meiser that arose out of Kibush Eretz Yisrael continuously needs the grounds for its existence to stand in order that the Chalais din of Chi of Truma can endure. Kibush Ha'aretz is the condition for the existence of Chalais Kedusha. Once that came undone, the Chalais din of Truma Meiser lapses. We immediately then have an answer to our difficulty about why lands that Olam Mitzrayim took are fit for the appointment of Smicha, even if the early bubble did not resettle. They no longer have Kedusha with respect to Truma Meiser, yet they are fit for Smicha. I mean, that's a certain kind of Kedusha also. But not the Kedusha for Truma Meiser. That's because the Chalais Shem Eretz Yisrael wasn't lost when Kibush came undone. For the idea of the entity of Eretz Yisrael is a Chalais Ishtanas, and as long as the appellate Eretz Yisrael applies to an area, it is fit for smicha appointments. The requirement to separate Truma Meiser from the produce of the land, however, is a result of the Kedusha of the land, which for Kedusha Rishayna is Chalais Din, hence it came to an end when Kibush was undone. We return to the problem of the Kesef Mishnah. Of course, the Olam Mitzrayim settled the land, but Chazaka didn't help at the first Kedusha making. At the first Aliyah, the entity of Eretz Yisrael had not yet existed, and only Kibush could activate the Chalais Shem Eretz Yisrael, which was necessary at that time. Once Kibush Ha'aretz was accomplished, it generated everything, both the Chalais Shem Eretz Yisrael and the Chalais Din Kedusha of Truma Meiser. Hence, Chazaka had no longer had any role to play. Now we have shown that the Chalais Shem Eretz Yisrael has never ceased to be, even after Galus Baba. And it's so that the Rambam had said that once the land was taken from Klal Yisrael, the conquest expired, was only in regards to the Kedushas Eretz. The produce of the land was no longer obligated in Truma Meiser, and Shvius was bottled. But the entity of Eretz Yisrael never came undone. The land underwent the Ishtanas, a change. Eretz Canaan became Eretz Yisrael forever. Later, as a result of the return and settlement of the Eilei Bavel, the dinim of Kedushas Eretz Yisrael took effect again, but not by virtue of Kibush, for there wasn't any Kibush done, and for there wasn't any need for such, because the entity of Eretz Yisrael already existed. So what do you have to conquer? Hence, it was the act of Chazaka achieved by settlement which directly produced the Kedushas Eretz in regards to the dinim of Truma Meiser. When this making of Kedushas Eretz, with this making of Kedushas Eretz, the hektish for Truma Meiser took place, and it endures for good, just like any hektish. It doesn't lapse on its own. Just because you made hektish with your diva, you were mocked or something, a man can die. It's still hektish. Everybody can go away, and it's still kaddish. But to explain in more depth, the Kesef Mishnah lamented that he doesn't see the difference between Kibush and Chazaka. Why does the effects of Kibush lapse with the Galus of Bavel, but Chazaka does not? The Rosh Hashiva Zechron suggests at the first Kedusha, all the effects were implemented by Kibush, but there was a difference in how we are to classify these effects. Kibush was triggered Kibush just triggered the entity of Eretz Yisrael to come into being. Once the Shem Eretz Yisrael was established and became extant, the Kibush Yachid originated and automatically flowed forth from the activation of the entity of Eretz Yisrael. The Kibush imbued the entity of Eretz Yisrael with the property to require Truma Maisers to be tithed out of the produce of the land. But Kibush did not trigger the dinim of Chiyuv Truma Maiser to arise. It was a second step that the Chiyuvim of Truma Maiser came about. It was considered a flowing forth from the properties that Kibush imparted to the entity of Eretz Yisrael. These properties needed Kibush Ors at its ground and source. Hence, once Kibush expired, all the effects that flow from Kibush ceased to be. Later, by the return from Babel, at the return and settlement of the Eili Babel, the act of Chazaka achieved by settlement directly produced the Kedushas Haaretz in regards to the dinim of Truma Ma'aser. If so, Chazaka acted as a trigger, not a source of the Kedusha which produces the dinim of Truma Ma'aser. Since the Eili Babel activated and triggered the second Kedusha, it is to be classified as a Chalois Shtanos, and Chalois Shtanos does not need the original activation as a source and grounds for its continued existence. Now, to explain more fully, there are two types of causes. Number one, there is a sibus of gairim, the necessary cause, the cause that triggers the resultant chalois, so that it comes to be. And number two, there is a sibus hamakor, the grounds for the effect to exist, the sufficient cause. In a simple case where when something comes to be, it continues to exist because once it has come to be, it has all it needs to continue to be. It continues to be because there was a hishtanos, an external effect. At the Kedusha Shniya, the Kedusha's Truma Ma'aser arose out of the settlement of the land, which resolves to a Ma'aser Chazaka. And this acted as a sibus agarim to trigger the dinim of Chiyuv Truma Ma'aser and create a Chalois Shtanos of Kedushas Haaretz. At the first Kedusha, though, there was no sibus agarim that triggered the Kedusha, but rather Kibush triggered the Chefza of Eretz Yisrael, and only by virtue of the Chalois Shem Eretz Yisrael did Kedusha flow, using Kibush as a sibus makor to support Kedushas Haaretz. Hence, once Kibush expired, Kedusha ceased to be.